Hello there and welcome to this video on the Day-State Delta Wolf. In this video we'll be covering a full disassembly of the rifle as well as pointing out any things that you need to be aware of as we go through it. The rifle that we're going to be working on today is a sub-12 Delta Wolf, although the information in this video will also be relevant to the FAC models as well as the Alpha Wolves. On your screen now you should see a complete list of all the tools that we're going to need to do this disassembly. It includes all the Allen key sizes as well as spanner sizes and finally any Day-State specific tooling required for the job. With that said and done, we can begin with the disassembly of the rifle. The first thing we'll do is degas it, and that's done simply by unscrewing the bottle. Once the bottle's off, we'll put this to one side. Now the next thing we need to do is make sure that there's no air left inside the plenum of the rifle. We can check that by quite simply looking at the back here, looking at the screen on the back and looking to see if we still have reg pressure in the rifle. The rifle is still reading 107 bar in the regulator, so we need to get rid of that. What we're going to be doing is firing the rifle in a nice safe direction to remove any and all air that's present in the rifle. With just a few dry fires in a nice safe direction, we see that the gauge on the back there is now reading 0. So we can assume that the rifle is now completely out of air. We will, however, be doing a mechanical check before we touch either the regulator or the valve. We will, however, talk you through that as we get to that stage. The next thing we're going to do is remove the battery. We do that by flipping the rifle on its end and locating the battery cover latch, pulling that back and lifting the butt piece up. Slide the butt piece off, and in the back here we see the battery. We're going to pull that out nice and simply, and then locating the switch wires there, we're just going to grab them nice and carefully and pull them out. Now, as with all the connections on the Delta Wolf, it's very important to grip the connection themselves or all of the wires together. So either the white connection, pull from the white connection off, or if you can't do that, grip all the wires together and pull nice and safely. Pulling on one individual wire can damage the connections and may pull them out from the connectors themselves. As we're doing a full disassembly of the rifle, it is recommended to leave the rifle overnight with the battery disconnected in order to allow the capacitors to discharge completely. At this stage we'll be leaving the rifle overnight with the battery disconnected, and then we'll be continuing on with the disassembly in the morning. With that out of the way, we can now begin the disassembly of the rifle. The first thing we're going to remove is the barrel. To do that, we're going to loosen this grub screw here using a 3mm Allen key. This doesn't need to be removed entirely, just a few turns, and that will allow us to slide the barrel out. So we'll disassemble the barrel and shroud, and I'll put the body of the rifle over to one side. The first thing we'll remove is the carbon fibre shroud. To do that, we'll remove these two grub screws in either side of the shroud using a 2.5mm Allen key. Once those are out, we can remove the carbon shroud and we're left with the chronograph. Next thing we'll do is we'll remove the chronograph assembly from the barrel. To do that, we're going to remove these two grub screws in either side of the shroud back boss here using a 2.5mm Allen key. Once that's done, we can grip the chronograph and lightly unscrew it from the barrel. And there we have the chronograph removed from the barrel itself. We obviously do have the breech seal in this end of the barrel, which we could remove if we needed to by using a nice sharp O-ring pick, piercing the O-ring and then hooking it out. Although we don't need to do that for this barrel as the breech seal is good. We will put the barrel to one side now though. At this stage we can remove the circuit board of the chronograph from the chronograph housing. To do that, we'll need to remove the O-rings that secure it to the housing, so we can roll the first one off and then remove the other 4 O-rings. With the O-rings removed, we can now lift off the chronograph from the housing. There we have it there. I will note that there is a small clear plastic insulating piece between the circuit board and the housing of the chronograph. There we have that. We'll put that to one side. The last thing that we can remove from the chronograph housing is the clear plastic tube that runs through the center of the unit. So to remove that, we simply need to remove this brass nut here. That can be done by using a nice big flat bladed screwdriver or by using a set of circlip pliers just in the flats of the nuts there to remove it. Now this one is nice and clean, nice and clear, so we're going to be leaving it installed on this rifle. But if you needed to get it out and replace it possibly, that is a part that Daystate will sell you, and it is fairly inexpensive. But for this video, we're going to be leaving this one in. I do also very briefly want to mention that this is the newer style of chronograph housing, which is made out of aluminium. The older ones were made out of plastic. So this is the new style here. So if your one is slightly different, don't worry, it may just be the older version. The next thing we're going to be removing and disassembling is this back piece here. First thing we'll do is upend the rifle and remove this bolt in the back here. That's done using a 3mm Allen key. With that done, we can tease this wire up here and then we can remove it. So as with all connections on the Delta, we need to be incredibly careful as we remove them. You always want to be gripping the connection itself, the white piece itself, or by the bulk of the wires. Just like when we disconnected the battery, we need to be nice and careful not to pull on any individual small wire here. So to remove this back connection, I'm just going to tease the wire up nice and carefully, and then by getting a good grip on the connection itself, just gently pull up and remove the connection, like so. Next up, we need to remove the cheek piece in order to gain access to the bolts on top. So to remove the cheek piece, we simply need to loosen these two screws here using a 2.5mm Allen key. Once they're both loose, the cheek piece can be slid off and we gain access to these 4 bolts here. To remove them, we're just going to be using a 3mm Allen key. With those 4 bolts removed, we can loosen this grub screw in the side here using a 3mm Allen key. Once that's done, we can slide this back block off from the block of the rifle itself. First thing we'll do though is make sure the connections up here are tucked away nicely so that they don't get caught as we remove the back block. And just poke them up in the top rail there, like so, so that they're out of the way. Once they're out of the way, we can just slide the back block off the rifle nice and carefully. As you take the back piece off, there is a spring in the end there, so make sure that it doesn't ping out and get lost. I'll put the body of the rifle to one side and we'll continue disassembling on the back block. The first thing we'll do is remove the screen from the front, and that's done by removing these 2 screws here using a 2mm Allen key. With that done, we can lift the screen off, pulling it down slightly and then levering it up. Then we can lay it over the top there, and then we can disconnect the ribbon cable up here by simply pulling on the 2 grey connection tabs and then pulling them downwards, so like so. That will allow the ribbon cable to come off and the screen can now be removed and put to one side. Next thing we'll do is loosen the 2 coil wires, these 2 here, and that's done using a flat bladed screwdriver. With those loosened, we can just very carefully pick out the coil wires using something like a plastic O-ring pick. And there we have it there. The coil wires have been removed. Next up, we're going to remove the 2 screws that secure the board into the back block, and that's done by using a T6 Torx bit. These screws do have insulating pads beneath them, so just make sure that they don't get lost as you take the screws out. The first one is over here, and the second one is just behind the ribbon cable. Just here. Next, very carefully using some tweezers, I'm just going to remove the small insulating pads from the board itself. And the other one is behind the ribbon cable. There we have it there. Next up, we're going to remove the coil and the parts from the back here. So in this piece here at the back, we're going to be using some nice snap ring pliers, getting in either side of the switch like so, pushing down, twisting anti-clockwise, and that will allow this back piece here to come out. It is spring loaded, so as you twist it, it will want to pop out, so just be careful it doesn't get lost. Next, we can very carefully tip the back piece up, remove the hammer, and then this black spacer piece. The next thing we'll remove is the coil. So with the bolt loose, we can just gently nudge it to one side, then very carefully tease the coil wires over the board and move them to the back of the rifle. That's the coil out in one piece. It does have this shield over it, so if it comes out as two pieces, that's not a problem. The last things we'll remove is the two metal rings in the back here. So there the two pieces are. In newer rifles, these two pieces have been combined into one piece, but on this rifle it was two pieces. Next thing we'll do is remove the board. To do that, we're just going to angle the board up nicely, being nice and careful. And remember, at this stage here, we can nice and carefully remove this connection at the back. Again, when possible, always grip the white connection part here rather than any individual wires. So there we have the board out, nice and simply. This is an older board, so the newer ones are slightly different, but the general disassembly procedure will be roughly the same. There we have it there. We'll stick this nice and carefully over to one side in an anti-static bag if one is available. The last thing we can remove from the rifle is the little catch at the back here for the battery cover. To do that, we're just going to loosen this screw here using a 2mm Allen key and remove the screw. As we do that, the catch may slide forward slightly, and that's because it's under spring tension. And as we remove the plastic catch here, just make sure that the spring at the back here doesn't get lost. With that all done, we can put this to one side and continue on the disassembly of the block. Now that we have the rear section of the rifle removed, we can carry out a mechanical safety check to make sure that there's no air left inside the rifle. What we're going to do to carry out this check is just quite simply here, press on the valve like so, and because we can press it and no air is escaping from anywhere, we know that the rifle is completely degassed, meaning that there's no air left trapped in the plenum chamber, and obviously as we've disconnected the bottle, there's no air supply. And before either the valve or the regulator is removed from the rifle, you do need to do a mechanical safety check of the rifle. I've carried it out on this one, so we're safe to proceed. The next thing we'll remove from the rifle is the regulator. And to do that, we're going to be using the day-state regulator removal tool here. This is just a pin spanner with the correct pin spacing for the regulator itself. If you don't have access to the day-state specific tool, you can use a set of snap ring pliers. They will work, although when possible, it's always better to use the day-state specific tool. To use it, we're just quite simply going to locate the regulator, which is this aluminium piece here. This is the sub 12 regulator, so it does not have the externally adjustable knob. If your rifle is an FAC one, it may have the externally adjustable knob, and to remove the knob, all you need to do is remove the screw out the centre, although it's not fitted to this rifle, so we're just going to be going in with the tool. With the regulator removed, we can disassemble it fully. To begin with, we'll remove the adjuster screw from the end using a flat-bladed screwdriver. There we have the adjuster screw there. With that out, we'll put our finger over the end so that the plastic puck inside the regulator doesn't get lost, and then by using an M4 screw we can screw that into the back of the piston and pull the piston out. If you don't have M4 screws on hand, all the screws that hold the top rail onto the block, and for that matter the top rail onto the back part here, are M4, so you can just take that one of those out and use that to pull the reg out. There we have it there. The small white plastic sealing part in there has stayed in the reg, so we're just going to tap that out very gently. And there it comes there. So a standard humour type regulator with the sealing puck, and there we have the Belleville washers. This rifle here is a sub 12 model, so this is obviously the sub 12 Belleville stack. It may be slightly different for FAC models, although this is the stack that was fitted to my rifle. So with the regulator disassembled, we'll put that to one side. We can just have a look in the housing for the regulator there. Nothing else is inside the hole, but there we have it there. Now we'll remove the valve from the rifle. Like the regulator, the valve does have a specific valve removal tool from Daystate, and like the regulator, whilst it's always better to use the official Daystate tool, you can get away with a set of snap ring pliers. So this is a set of snap ring pliers, and if we just use the angled pair like so, a nice good quality set, put them in the holes like that, and then we can loosen the back piece here. Now I've got the tool, so I'm going to be using the tool, but it is possible to remove it with snap ring pliers if you're in a pinch. With the tool fitted onto the valve, quite simply we line up the pinholes with the pins, drop that on like that, then by using a 19mm spanner we can simply loosen the nut. After a couple turns it will be loose enough that we can unscrew it by hand. And with the nut removed we can grip a hold of the rifle firmly and the valve, give it a nice pull and it should come out. They can sometimes be fairly tight, so you may need to grip the shaft, this part here, with some nice soft jaws on a pair of pliers, something similar, and get it out that way. My one, however, I was able to pull it out. It does have two sealing O-rings, one larger one and one smaller one, so just be careful they don't get lost as you take the valve out. And then to disassemble the valve fully, it's fairly easy. What we need to do is push one half one way and pull the other half the other way. So, like so. Once we're at this stage, we can allow the back part or the front part to rock out, and the two halves of the valve can be separated. Like so. Can also pull the valve pin out. That comes out as one unit on my rifle. And there we have it there. We have the valve spring, valve return spring, and we also have this cup at the back here which acts as a spring guide and also seals on this O-ring in the back. There we have it there. So this valve is the valve that was fitted to my sub 12 rifle, although the valves on the FAC versions may be slightly different. There have also been a couple of revisions with the release of the Alpha Wolf, although all of the valves share the same disassembly process, so whilst they may look slightly different, they will all disassemble the same way. With that done, we'll put the valve to one side and continue on with the rest of the rifle. To make the rifle a little easier to handle, I'm going to be taking off the grip and the scope rail. To remove the grip, we simply need to get an Allen key and push in this little tab here, this one at the base here, and that will allow this little tab here to pop out, and we see the large diameter Allen key in the base there. We're going to loosen that with a 5mm Allen key. As you undo this, there is a spring beneath the grip, so just keep a hold of the grip as you undo the screw. There we have it there. Comes out complete with the spring in the top there. So just bring in the top there, and in the base of the safety, this part here, this is a little pin, so we're going to knock that out nice and easily like so, and that will just stop it from getting lost. Next up, we'll remove the scope rail. To do that, we're going to be loosening these 4 bolts here. That's done using a 3mm Allen key. With those loose, we can slide the top rail off, or the scope rail I should say. The next thing we can do is remove the top rail from the rifle. To do that, we're going to be loosening these 2 screws at the front here first, and removing this front block. That's done by using a 3mm Allen key. Removing these 2 screws here. As you remove the 2 screws, just make sure the part here doesn't fall down, as it does have a small connection beneath it. So again, like all connections on the Delta Wolf, you have to make sure both sides of the connection are supported, and that you pull from the white connection part rather than the individual wires. I know I do keep repeating myself, but I don't want you to damage your rifle as you disassemble it. The next thing we'll do is remove these 6 screws from the top here using a 3mm Allen key. As you take these screws out, just be aware that the 2 at the front and the back are the same length, and then the ones in the middle are slightly longer. So just be aware of that as you take that off. With the 6 screws removed, we can very, very carefully lift the top rail up, being careful that the connections at the front and back don't get caught within the top rail. We can now stick this to one side. Next thing we can do is remove this side plate here so it doesn't get lost. Next up, we can very, very carefully remove this top wire from the aluminium channel. As we bring it up, being nice and careful of the wire so it doesn't get caught on anything. Then as we bring it up, we're going to disconnect this small connection at the back here. So if I rock the rifle over, you see this connection at the back, and again, like with all the connections on the Delta Wolf, gripping the white connection part rather than the wires themselves, and gently teasing it apart like so. With that done, we can rewrite the block and then gently move the main wire over to one side. We'll also gently pick this wire up. It is hot glued in from the factory as to give it a little bit of strain relief and to stop it moving around inside the rifle. And then we're going to remove these 2 screws here using a flat bladed screwdriver. So this one at the back here, or in the middle, and this one at the front. Next, we're very, very carefully going to lift the aluminium channel up. Being nice and careful not to lose the 2 spacers that are on the bottom of the screws there. They can sometimes be left on the block, so just make sure these 2 spacers here, one at the front, one in the middle here, don't get lost. As we pull the aluminium channel up, we're just going to tease this wire through the slot in the middle there, this slot here, and then we'll stick the channel over to one side. With that done, we can now pull the pellet probe back, be nice and careful with the arm, and remove this unit as one piece here. The switch may come off as well, that's not a problem. We can fish the wire through the hole, and there we have the switch. And that's our cocking indicator. It's what tells us if the rifle is cocked or has been cocked. We can now stick this part to one side. If we needed to, we could remove the cocking arm by just loosening and removing this screw here, and this would allow this whole unit to be removed. As you do remove it, just make sure that this little brass ferrule here inside the cocking arm doesn't get lost. It is normally held in there by some grease from the factory, but it is always worth mentioning that it may fall out if you're not careful. But there we have it there. We could also remove the pellet probe from the back here by loosening this screw here. There are already quite a few videos on caliber changes for the Delta Wolf and Alpha Wolves on the Daystate channel, so we're just going to be leaving that in for now. With that removed, we can now remove this plastic part here. We do that by taking our finger, hooking it through the block, and then pushing up from the bottom. A little harder if you've got big fingers like mine, but it can be done. There we have it there. With that done, we can now move on to removing the trigger from the rifle. The first thing we'll do is remove this bottom rail here, and that's done nice and carefully by removing these 4 screws in the base of the rifle using a 3mm Allen key. The next thing we're going to remove from the rifle is the trigger and pressure sensor unit. Now this particular rifle is fitted with the newer pressure sensor, which has a 2-piece wire. This means that the wire has a connection just beneath this part here, and if we tease that out, I'll show you exactly what it is. So there's the connection there. The connection just allows for an easier removal of the pressure sensor and trigger unit. The older versions used a 1-piece cable, and the disassembly procedure is slightly different, so I'll just go through that very quickly. What we're going to do is we're going to disconnect this wire here and then remove the trigger unit. With the 1-piece wire, obviously you can't disconnect the cable at this end. What you'll have to do is disconnect it from the board that's on the trigger unit. Don't worry, I'll show you exactly what to do, but you do need to be a little more careful with the 1-piece wire, as you do have to remove the trigger unit and position it in such a way as to not stretch or damage the wires. Although on this rifle, as we've got the connection here, we can disconnect that. Now obviously it's a small connection, and with all connections on the Delta Wolf, you need to grip both sides of the white connection and then pull them apart, like so, not gripping on any one wire in particular. I know I do keep repeating myself on that issue, but it is very important. With the pressure sensor disconnected, there's the wires there, we can now go on to removing the trigger unit. What we've got to do is remove these 2 screws from either side of the rifle. So on this side, that's done using a 2mm Allen key. With the screws removed, we can now very carefully remove the trigger unit. What you have to do is rock it back slightly and then lift up. Whilst you do that, make sure there's plenty of wire coming in from the top. Just feed it a little extra slack as to not pinch anything. And as we've got the 2-piece connection, it is slightly different from the 1-piece, although I will do it as if we've got the 1-piece connection. So with a bit of slack in the top there, what we'd need to do is pull the trigger unit out, feed the wire in from the back, and then rotate the unit like so. At this stage we can remove these 2 screws here using a Phillips head screwdriver, being nice and careful to not lose the screws. And once both are loose, we can pull off this grey capping piece and stick it to one side. At this stage, with the 1-piece connection, we'd need to disconnect the pressure sensor, which is this one here, like so, and also the main wiring harness from the rifle, like that. Then we can slide this cable out from the base, just helping it along its way, like so. There we have the trigger unit removed nice and safely. Now that way works for both the 1-piece and the 2-piece wire, so the older and the newer pressure sensors. Although with the newer pressure sensor, with the 2-piece wire, you can pull the wire out, like so, and you do have a little extra room as you maneuver the trigger unit out. But there we have it there. Now we can lift up the block of the rifle and just gently feed this wire here through the block, nice and carefully like so. And now we can stick this to one side. Next we'll disassemble the trigger unit entirely. To do that, we'll just remove these 2 screws here using a Phillips headed screwdriver. like so. I'll also, just to make it a little easier, remove the pressure sensor from the top there, and also the safety wire, which is this one here. Those two out, tip the screws out, and then the board can be nice and safely removed. That's our trigger on the bottom, this part here. That's what fires our rifle, and that's the trigger board itself. So we'll put that to one side. Next, we'll remove the pressure sensor wire. So this is the first half of the pressure sensor wire. The other half is still in the rifle. And then we can remove the safety, this switch here, from the trigger. Again, just by removing these two screws using a Phillips headed screwdriver. Tipping them out and then removing the switch itself. Next up, we can remove the trigger from the unit by quite simply pushing this pin out here, like so. Pulling out from this side. There is a spring beneath this, so as you take it out, just be nice and careful. There we have it there. So we have a number of adjustments on the trigger. We have this little screw in the back here, that one there. If we loosen this, we'd obviously be able to rotate the trigger blade, move it up and down slightly, and we loosen that by using a 0.9mm Allen key or a 0.89mm Allen key. Either one will work. We also have a forward and backward adjustment of the trigger pole. If we loosen this screw here using a 1.5mm Allen key, we can remove the position of the trigger. We also have the first stage adjustment, which is this one here. That adjusts our first stage. We have the trigger weight adjustment, which is this one here. And we also have the second stage adjustment at the back, which is this one here. Those three all being adjusted by a 1.5mm Allen key. But there we have the trigger all disassembled, so we can stick the pieces over to one side. Next thing we'll remove is the pressure sensor. And then by using a set of snap ring pliers, just put them in the flats like so. Gently twist. Once you get it loose, you can do the rest by hand, probably quicker and safer. Once the brass nut's up, we can pull the pressure sensor off. And then there is an O-ring in the base here, so I'll get you in a bit closer. See the O-ring in the base there? We'll hook that out while we're here so it doesn't get lost. Here we have it. There's the O-ring. Next thing we'll do is remove the safety switch. Now I will say that this cannot be removed until the trigger unit is taken out. If you try and take the safety switch out before you take the trigger unit out, you can end up damaging the little safety shoe, this part here. It can become dislodged from the switch itself, so just be aware of that. But we can remove the safety switch quite simply by using a 2mm Allen key. Once one side's been removed, just lift the block up and the other side will come off. There we have it there. I will also mention while we're here that the Alpha Wolves do have spacers in between the safety switch and this pinion in the middle here, so just be aware of that. With that done, there's just a couple more things we can remove from the block. The first being the fill port, so this part here. To remove that, what we're going to use is a 10mm deep socket. Stick that over there. Just simply loosen that. It does have a Doughty washer beneath it, so just be careful that doesn't get lost. And here's the unit here. This is obviously the fill port for the rifle, and if we look in the base here, we see a one-way valve, this part here. To get that one-way valve out, what we'd have to do is connect the Foster fitting up to a Foster fitting on a dive bottle and very gently pressurize the system. or the unit here. When we pressurize it, the one-way valve will want to push out the end, so you have to be incredibly careful when you do that, and you don't want to be putting a lot of pressure in the whip. Just gently opening your bottle, just cracking it loose, and the one-way valve should pop its way out the end. I'll do that very quickly off camera. And there we have the one-way valve removed from the Foster fitting, that unit there. So we'll stick this to one side and we'll remove the gauge from the side of the rifle. And to do that, what we're going to do is very carefully remove the plastic gauge cover, like so. They can be quite stiff, but they're not glued on or anything like that. Next, we're going to be using a 22mm spanner and then very gently cracking the gauge loose, removing it by hand. Here we have the gauge. It does have an O-ring beneath it, so we'll very carefully hook that out. If you look in the base of the gauge hole there, just carefully remove the O-ring. There we have it there. The last thing that we're going to be removing from the rifle is one of the O-rings in the back here. So I don't know how well the camera's going to pick that up, but hopefully you can see there that the internal hole there has two O-rings in it. These are the sealing O-rings for the barrel to stop transfer port air from escaping around the barrel and not travelling up the centre of it. So hopefully you can see that there. To remove them, what we're going to use is a nice sharp O-ring pick, hook it in the side of one, and then remove the O-ring like so. I won't bother removing the other one, which is just a bit further back, but they're nice and easy to remove once you've got the top rail off. But there we have the rifle pretty much fully disassembled. The only thing that we're not going to be taking apart on this video is the front bottle connection, this part here. They are glued on from the factory, or they're done up incredibly tight, so they're fairly difficult to remove. And I don't want to risk damaging the block to remove it on camera, although I will say that it's incredibly unlikely that you'll ever develop a leak anywhere in this area. They're sealed up well from the factory, so we're going to be leaving it as it is for this video. And that's going to about do it for this video. In the next video we'll cover the reassembly of the rifle, as well as giving you some O-ring sizes and any information that you need in order to carry out the reassembly. So for now, I hope this video has been useful. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.